Welcome back to the Skift Travel Podcast. I'm Skift's editor-in-chief, Sarah Kopit, joined as always by Skift's head of research, Seth Borko. Hey Seth, how you doing today?
I'm good. How you doing, Sarah? Good to be back.
I am excellent. Getting ready for India.
Oh,
Gearing
that's
up.
going to be a big trip. I don't know if will this air before or after that, but either way, it's a big trip.
It's a big trip, and I have my visa and that is moderately related to what we're going to talk about today. We are going to get into the golden visas. It's been in the news a lot lately after President Donald Trump announced a new program that provides residency and a pathway to citizenship for people who invest $5 million in the United States of America. So that is an oversimplification, but to help us make sense of it, we've got Max Tremaine. Did I say that right?
Yes, thanks.
Yes, on the pod. He is the CEO of Sherpa, a company that helps customers navigate the rules and regulations of traveling around the world. But before we get into it, this is your quick reminder to send any questions or comments you may have to podcasts@skift.com. And please don't forget to follow or subscribe this pod wherever you are listening or watching. It helps us get the word out about the Skift Travel Podcast. So Max, thank you so much for joining us today. In your experience, what is the market like for the gold cards, as President Trump called it, or these golden visas that allow people to kind of pay their way into citizenship?
Yeah, it's a pretty well-established paradigm for golden visas, which are programs that allow for residency and golden passports for citizenship, where basically in exchange for some sort of economic activity, someone is given a fast track to residency or citizenship. There are more than 30 programs, including the existing US EB-5 program. And they do kind of run the gamut in terms of what the requirements are and what is given. But yeah, the gold card program, the big distinction there is basically simplicity. The way that President Trump presented it, it would be a donation-based model where there would be a straightforward, pathway to residency and even citizenship. There's some lack of clarity for exactly how it would be administered, but definitely has brought a lot of attention to the space.
Lack of clarity from the current administration. I can't believe it. I can't believe such a thing.
I'm going to move right past that, Seth. So for these so-called golden visas, who takes advantage of them in other countries? So in programs that are currently established, what's the typical clientele for this type of passport?
It really depends on the country that's granting the residency or citizenship. There are, three big reasons that people will go for these programs. They either want a stronger passport, they want a larger or more flexible market, or they're looking for lower taxes. So, depending on the program, some of the most prominent programs for residency would be Austria, Egypt, Turkey. These are countries that, offer a variety of those different benefits. For the United States, depending on where you're coming from, there's a good value proposition for all three of those things.
Wait, can you explain what you mean by market? You're looking for a different market. Are people bringing these are personal citizenships, or people are bringing their businesses with them? What does that mean by that?
So very often the golden visa programs involve either investment in the destination or some other sort of economic activity, like you're adding a certain number of jobs or you're bringing some sort of production into the destination country. From the traveler's perspective, that could be access to the destination market in terms of the ability to sell in that market. But it could also mean like just access to labor, like if you're coming from a really small country or something like that.
You said something earlier. You said that it would be a donation in the U.S. case. Who's getting the money? Who are they donating to? The U.S. government?
Yeah. So the way that the program was presented, in so many words, was you would pay $5 million for residency, for green card privileges plus a pathway to citizenship, and the green card is a pathway to citizenship. That is similar to programs that exist already in some island nations, where instead of a kind of more, you could say, convoluted program where it's like you're going to bring economic activity in with you. It's going to be, police. These programs usually take several years to play out. It would be effectively a donation to the destination government. Like Palau just launched a golden passport program like this to fund work on climate change and stuff like that. So it's a much simpler program.
So you're kind of laying out a paradigm where there's sort of some of these golden visas are revenue raisers and some of them are investment programs. And we the United States, have you mentioned this top, we have an EB-5 residency program. So tell us a little bit about what EB-5 is and how would this be different from that?
It is based on some economic, ties to the United States coming in as a part of the visa applicant's entry to the U.S. Some amount of job creation is typically what people point to, which, obviously takes years to plan. It's a long process. The suggested gold card program would be much simpler.
So if we're switching, I think it's interesting because I do think it's an interesting nuance that the U.S. you can already buy U.S. citizenship. You just have to buy it with a job-making investment project. Between these two models, you said Austria, Turkey, I think you named, or not Turkey, Egypt, you might have named a couple others, versus the Palau Caribbean nation model. What kind of what's the different customer base look like? Like, as if the U.S. does a golden visa, who's our customer going to be for these visas? And what does that mean, I guess, broadly for global mobility?
Yeah, so going back to those three value propositions, the three reasons that people will take advantage of golden visas and golden passports would be to gain a stronger passport, so a passport that is easier to travel the world with, access to larger or more flexible being just less regulation heavy markets, and then lower taxes. To go back to it, Austria, Egypt, and you're right, Turkey have programs where you can enter those markets effectively and gain citizenship. For Austria as an example, that would be one of the strongest passports in the world. So that's the reason someone might want to take advantage of that program. Egypt and Turkey are large and highly productive markets. Those are good reasons to go there. In terms of lower taxes, it really depends on where you're coming from. It's completely relative.
But they're not particularly strong passports.
Egypt and Turkey, you wouldn't call them strong passports, no.
The U.S. is a pretty strong passport, though. So that's
U.S. is a very strong passport. Again, that's what I mean. Like, if the U.S. were to move to a program that was very easy to apply for, like if you were to draw an analogy to the U.S. TN visa, this is a visa that Canadians and Mexicans can get, and it's administered on arrival by the CBP agent. If a golden visa program were that easy to apply for and had those strengths of a strong passport, very large, very flexible market, and considerably lower taxes than a lot of areas, it would be a very strong value proposition. Yeah, I could see a lot of people shifting off of other, golden visa and passport programs toward a gold card program. It would be a very strong value proposition.
So this is the cynical journalist in me coming out. Like, with these programs, and especially in the United States, what's the downside of having a passport program like this? Like, how can it be taken advantage of, manipulated? Like, how can it be used for bad and evil things? Tell us all those things.
Yeah, it's a good question. The ability to move from a weaker passport to a stronger passport does kind of call into question motives for using these types of programs. There's a really good example, actually. In 2023, the United Kingdom restricted visa-free access for nationals of a few places: Dominica, East Timor, Honduras, Namibia, and Vanuatu. And it was actually linked to the ability for people to game systems and gain these passports to effectively like erase travel histories and stuff like that. This was one of the reasons. It wasn't the case for all of those different nationalities, but they were all nationalities that were more straightforward for people to gain. So yeah, you could imagine someone having a kind of colored, travel history if they had an ability to easily get a new passport, it would effectively erase some of that. Although there are ways to get around that for governments, access to data. This is somewhere that Sherpa does a lot of work, giving governments good access to data in a way that respects the privacy of travelers. You could mitigate some of those risks.
I'm actually glad you brought that up. Tell us a little bit more about Sherpa and what your company does.
Yeah, so we started Sherpa just because myself and my co-founder had a lot of challenges understanding what we needed to cross borders. We had missed trips, been disrupted multiple times because we didn't have the right visas. So we started building technology products to make it easy for travel platforms to inform travelers about what they need to cross a border to get a visa using information from a traveler's profile and itinerary, and then also validate to operators and carriers that people have the right documents for their trips, making this a seamless experience.
I wanted to ask Sarah, if that's okay with you. You were asking a question earlier as a journalist, and I want to ask as a market researcher about the addressable market for this, both I guess for visa in general, but let's go back to golden visa for a second, and then let's talk back about broader visas. But on the golden visas, is there anyone? I mean, do you have this intelligence? Do we have any sense of how many people are buying golden visas in a given year or decade or whatever?
It's a great question. There really is not super data on these programs and how much they're taken up. I mean, you can just imagine off the bat having to invest on the low end $50,000 US, on the high end, quarter, $500,000, $1 million in a destination country really filters the applicability of these types of visas. There is a major shift going on in the travel visa space. When we started Sherpa 10 years ago, 1 in 100 international air travelers needed an e-visa or ETA for their trip. We're at roughly a third of all international air travelers requiring those types of documents now. In 2 years, it'll be more than half will cross over. So there is what you could call a global flattening of visa requirements. This idea of a strong and weak passport is less relevant than it was 10 years ago. So that has been a pretty big shift.
We've gone from like 1 in 100 to like 33 in 100 needing some sort of electronic visa.
That's correct.
That's a big shift. Is
1
that
in 33? Yeah.
Is that because there's fewer like hard visa restrictions? Is that just, I guess my question, is that existing visa restrictions that were old paper-based, stamp-based visas move into the electronic world? Or is it an actual change in the regulatory landscape? Like, are we just watching a digitization shift, or are we actually seeing a real shift in government visa policy?
It's a great question. So you are seeing the shift away from paper-based travel documents toward electronic documents. The Indian e-visa would be a great example of this. India used to have an arduous process, paper-based, to apply for access to travel to India. Now they have an electronic visa platform. Usually when those platforms are introduced, they were applied to a broader set of travelers inbound. There's another class of documents called electronic travel authorizations. The pioneer here was Australia. They had a specific program where many people would show up after like a 20-hour flight to Australia and be turned away by the immigration and customs authorities. So they implemented a system where they would basically pre-vet travelers ahead of time through an electronic travel authorization. The US has one of these, the US ESTA program, Canadian ETA. The UK ETA is a new one this year, now required for Americans and Canadians. In a month from now will be required for Europeans as well. And the largest of these programs is in the process of rolling out. It's called the EU ETIAS program. That's the program that's going to shift us over the 50% mark in terms of international air travelers requiring these documents.
Can you imagine? I'm so grouchy getting off a long haul flight. Like, I can't imagine like getting off a 20-hour flight to Australia and being turned away.
Sarah, can I tell you, we had a couple episodes ago, we had the head director of Australia Tourism on. We were talking about trips to Australia. When I went right out of college, and I did not realize I needed an electronic authorization until the morning of my flight. So I was very close to being one of those travelers.
People.
I remember that because I said there's no visa required. It's easy. I don't need to worry about it. And then I did a Google search or something, and it was like, no, you need to fill out this. But that, it felt like a money grab. Some of these electronic authorizations feel like money grabs. Like, what do you think about that, Max? Like, it just seems like, oh, do they really do anything? Do the governments even do anything with this data? It just seems like a good way to collect a fee and trip up a traveler, or am I being a cynic?
It's a good question. I mean, there is a value proposition to what we just described. For the Australian government, if they can funnel people that they want to do advanced vetting on into an embassy or a consulate, there is a value proposition to both the government in that it's obviously a lot cheaper to spend time in an embassy or consulate than it is in an airport. And then for the traveler, from the traveler's perspective as well, like you said, if you were going to be turned away by the Australian Immigration and Customs Authority, you prefer to do it, before packing up and getting on the plane. So yeah, there is a value proposition to the traveler. To your point, these are programs that fund themselves. They're not spending their own taxpayer dollars on these programs. It's always paid for by the traveler, and I mean, you can assume that there's some benefit built into the government.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to think, is when this program goes into effect, I'm trying to think about like the kind of the knock-on benefits for maybe real estate or business, like what markets might benefit from this. Like the one that pops into my head immediately is Miami. I don't know why, but I could see that being a place where a lot of people
Miami, right?
With golden visas, go. But what do you think about that? Like who in the United States, or what regions, I suppose, what real estate markets, what business markets in the United States benefit from a program like this?
Well, it's an interesting question. You can think that dynamic economies benefit from enterprising, productive people, of any sort. And you can assume, a litmus test for a highly productive or enterprising person can be that they have $5 million to spend on a gold card, So that is going to benefit the economy fairly broadly, you could say in simple terms. In terms of which markets are going to benefit, there is a kind of way in which I see a lot of the benefit going to the top, cities that are already extremely productive, where these people want to be, New York, LA, San Francisco. You go down the list. I imagine that, up and coming cities would benefit as well, like Miami. But you could also see like the consumer markets that are highly dynamic and growing, Carolinas, places like that. I could see benefiting from entrepreneurs entering the country.
I think the reason I think that is because I see this, I think in my own head, right or wrong, as like a luxury product. Like this is something that, I kind of think if you have a business that you want to be here, it's kind of like there would be a different way. This to me seems like I want a US passport, or I want to come here for some reason, and I'm very rich and I don't want to have to deal with that other, like all that other nonsense. I just want to do this. I just want to give you $5 million and you're going to give me my passport, and then we're done. We're square. Is that right? Are these luxury products? Is this like a Birkin, or,
it really depends on where the person is coming from. You hear stories from most Americans of the pilgrimage to, the city on the hill where you can, have freedom and the ability to do everything we benefit from doing in America. My inclination is to say, like, yes, obviously you're going to need $5 million to put aside for this type of program. But you could imagine for people who are coming from a place where there just is not as much opportunity as there legitimately is in the United States, being able to scrape together as much as you could to pay for that program. Maybe it's not your the only money that you have, but if what you have is $5 million plus enough to get by, you might legitimately be much better off in the United States. And there probably are easier programs to take advantage of, but it's not necessarily unforeseeable that a simple program for access to the United States would have a broader market or broader target audience than these existing programs.
Would that push governments, both the US government and foreign governments that want to be competitive, to simplify other immigration pathways?
Yeah, I mean, you'd hope so. The nature of most travel document requirements is that they're reciprocal. So the reason that the UK and the EU are turning on ETA programs is because those programs exist for the United States and Canada. So these are, in a way, this is the flattening of requirements for transatlantic travel. You could imagine if a program like this existed, like I said earlier, I can certainly see a world where people are going to be moving off of golden visa and golden passport programs for other countries toward the United States, because this is a highly competitive. The suggested program would be highly competitive. So you could imagine that competition would spur other countries to shift their programs.
All right, so let's take a break there, and we will come back on the other side with more on visas, golden and otherwise.
Welcome back to The Break. We pick up our conversation with Max Tremaine, co-founder of Sherpa, as we discuss golden visas, regular visas, and all things travel documentation and I guess paperwork, but now it's all electronic. It's not paper anymore. But it's an interesting topic, really, and there's a lot of detail here, and it's a big market. When we left the break, Max, you were talking about how the golden visa, in some ways, is a flattening as we see more and more pathways to citizenship. You were also mentioning reciprocity. I got to ask another Trumpy question, which is, what about all this like trade war and tariff stuff? Could we see, in response to tariffs and trade stuff, could we see visa restrictions as a response to a statement in reciprocity for something that Trump does that other countries don't like?
Yeah, it would not be unprecedented. For example, there were some diplomatic tensions between Canada and India a couple of years ago that affected the visa requirements for Canadians traveling to India. That tension has subsided considerably over the last couple of years, and now you see those requirements resumed. It's not an unusual thing for those requirements to shift. The tensions between the United States, Canada, and Mexico specifically will be really interesting. We have NAFTA, agreement-based visas. We have effectively freedom of movement between Canada and the U.S., obviously not so much between Canada and Mexico, but you could certainly see a shift in requirements because of a trade war.
Have you seen any early shifts in your data in terms of visa applications? Like, are there fewer Chinese visas being approved, or is that not something that you really have insight into?
It's not something that would necessarily show up for China. Chinese travel still has not recovered in as big a way, so it would be hard to show up there. I will say I have not seen anything that indicates to me that there is a really big shift in people's travel preferences because of the current, global tensions. And who knows why that is, but we're still seeing records of international travel, which is fantastic.
For what it's worth, Max, our survey data says the same thing, that even though Trump's a lot of bluster, actual travelers are not necessarily changing their travel decisions.
So I'm curious to talk a little bit about the kind of the tech side of visas. You were saying earlier about how much easier it is now to get a visa to go to India. I've done it both ways. I sat at the consulate. I got one like 12 years ago, and I just did it a couple of weeks ago to go for our event that's happening next week. Um, how how does it work now? Like, how is visa intelligence or the e-visas being directly kind of linked into both government systems on the public end, but then in private systems, like you were talking about with airlines and hotels who do these checks kind of before you end up in Australia without the right documentation. How does that work? What is kind of the back end that us as travelers we don't even see? What's going on there?
Yeah, well, I mean, these are web-based programs. So the electronic visa and ETA systems are using, the nuts and bolts of the web that have existed for decades now. I would say the biggest opportunities that Sherpa has found from these documents moving online is to use modern technology like AI to make these processes easier and put them in one place. So it's much easier to automate web processes than it is to automate paper-based programs. Sherpa also applies for some paper-based travel documents, and the cost difference is obviously night and day between those different types of programs.
And so that does it get easier as everything kind of becomes more uniformly online? Like, is there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's
so what you're talking about is kind of the vision of Sherpa. So when we started, when we released our first product, the vision for the product was that the best travel visa experience is no travel visa experience. So we wanted to build these processes in using a set of modern APIs to many of the world's leading travel products. Like we work with American Airlines, Booking.com, Amex GBT. And what we're trying to do is to connect the context of a traveler, so their traveler profile, their itinerary, to the government systems, so that instead of filling out these documents, introducing the opportunity for human error and filling stuff out, you can just have one-click visa applications. Like by the numbers, we take applications that take on average 40 minutes, and we reduce that process to one click because of that level of integration. That's the really exciting thing for us. We're also able to use modern AI to be able to vet the documentation that's coming in, the photos that people are using for their application. We create a process that is much more seamless and straightforward. And that would be basically impossible with the previous paradigm for travel documentation.
And forgive me for asking such a basic question, but your client is the travel provider. Like Booking.com is paying you because is paying you in order to provide a service for the Booking.com customer to make it a more seamless transaction.
Yeah, that's correct. So Sherpa is the company that is fulfilling the actual visa application. We are applying as a third party, but we're working with travel companies to make this process seamless, to build it into their processes, where the value proposition to the travel company is people are not going to be showing up at the airport without the right documents. I have a positive ancillary service that I'm able to provide, and I have greater intelligence about the documentation that people have. I know that people are going to show up with the right documents, so I can mitigate those risks well ahead of time.
This is going to be a tough question for you. I'm sorry, Max, and you can dodge it if you need to. I'm going to say that in advance. Is there such a thing as too accurate with a visa application? There are some countries where maybe you wouldn't want to tell them exactly what you do for work or your full background, or there's a little bit. Sometimes it's nice to have a little bit of a gray area in your visa application. Is there such a thing as too accurate? Is there something, a bygone day of just putting a blank answer in your visa form and just hoping that the guy just doesn't ask too many questions?
No, that's a good question. I mean, there are a lot of visa applications that have optional questions. Generally, what we will do is we'll present them as much more clearly optional so that people don't have to provide, an excessive amount of information when they're submitting a document. Whereas, if you might be applying directly, you could, provide what you might call TMI on an application. I think this is just one of the benefits of generally having a third party act on your behalf with any sort of, application.
So what do you think is the kind of like what's the future? Like outside, we talked about golden visas a lot, but in on the other spectrum of all the different types of visas, regulations, paperwork going on, what does the future hold for travelers and the travel industry at large when it comes to visas? We were talking about Europe before we started today.
So the future that Sherpa is creating by working with the retailer, the carrier, the operator, and the government is that governments are going to be able to do, what is a legitimate job for them. Vetting travelers coming inbound to a country for the purposes of, law and defense. And the traveler is going to be able to have a truly seamless experience where, Sherpa effectively is figuring out all the things that person needs, getting them the right documents, providing those documents to the right people, all with the consent of the traveler to the ends of having a truly seamless border crossing experience. So you could imagine a future where international flights were, effectively as simple as domestic flights, where there's more kind of focus on security for domestic flights, better data sharing for international flights. And again, you have this convergence in the experience.
Can you talk a bit about what that means then for like brands? Is this a new product, or is this just going to become increasingly just a standard part of the luxury experience? If you have to apply if you're doing visa paperwork, you're not a luxury traveler. Is that the future that we're going towards?
I don't think it's going to be a luxury thing. I think the benefits to the travel platform and to the carrier are profound. I'm not going to have to vet people's documents. I'm not going to have to keep up on all of these changing rules and restrictions. I'm just going to have this product built in. It's going to figure out everything for every traveler. And, again, our dream, going back to why we started Sherpa, we had both missed trips because we just didn't have the right documents. We didn't have any of this stuff figured out. In the future, this is all going to be figured out in the background. Like, the reason we called the company Sherpa is because the Sherpa is like the person in the background of the photo carrying all of the bags while you go kind of fulfill your travel dreams. That's really what we're going for.
Remember during COVID when the poor people behind the desk at the airlines had to like check all of your, vaccine?
You guys did a fair amount with that, right?
Yeah, we did. I mean, it benefited us that we were a tech company working on travel documentation. Like if you were manually curating all that information, it was impossible. Like the fun stats we pointed to is that we would process tens of thousands of database changes a week when the COVID requirements were in their kind of peak flux. That was a really good test for our systems. And now, luckily, we're in a much more stable environment. Although there are still kind of, we are still in this kind of groundswell of change in the documentation space.
Is there anything that can be done, whether it's you or someone else or just the company itself? I feel like what you're describing is this great world where everything's going to be digital, it's going to be seamless, it's going to be great. And I've used Sherpa before, and I remember using it during COVID and checking the requirements on the stuff. What I remember is like it's so easy to apply, it's so easy to do all this stuff. I could check the restrictions. Then I would show up at the airport terminal, an actual airline person there who's basically just screaming at people. Did you get let me see that QR code. Show me a QR code. You can't check your bag until I see this or that, right? Like, I feel like there is a point where I don't know. Or some airlines won't let me check in because they need to the gate agent needs to verify my passport. So all of a sudden they built this beautiful app. They've got beautiful Sherpa on the back end doing all this great stuff. It's all seamless. And they shut it all down, and I can't check in online, and I've got to show up to the gate agent and show my passport. Like, when is that going to get fixed?
Did you fly from Cancun to the United States during COVID, Seth? Because, like, that was my exact experience in the Cancun airport with just JetBlue counter.
Yes.
Like,
yeah, I mean,
yes.
No, I flew to the Caribbean. It was a different island in the Caribbean. It was Antigua, but it was exactly the same.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Poor JetBlue. Okay.
So, Seth, I think what you're describing is like the arc of a airline using Sherpa. It's like first they use it to inform travelers about what they need, then they use them to add the visa to the itinerary, and then they use it in the airport to have a simple, pre-approval basically for travelers, so they have a seamless in-airport experience. Different airlines are in different states of how they use Sherpa. The ideal state, I think, we'll be able to do with more and more travelers because of the experiences that you're talking about. It is a terribly jarring experience when you have a run-in with any sort of travel document. So, by using Sherpa more deeply and by thank you for helping us spread the word. We're going to solve these problems.
All right. Well, Max, thank you so much for coming on the pod today, talking about golden visas and all the ways that we can be prepared when we are getting our travel documents ready. So thanks everybody for joining us. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Seth. And we'll see everybody next week. Thank you for listening to the Skift Travel Podcast. Wherever you're listening, please make sure to subscribe. If you like what you're hearing, rate us 5 stars or leave us a positive review. It really helps get the word out about us, our podcast, and make sure that we can still continue to bring it to you free of charge every week.
If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell as well. That way you'll know every time we have a new episode.